Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Blind Android Users Podcast. Today is February the 20th, 2021. We are glad that we're introducing a friend of ours from the UK, Pete Torkin. And at the same time, we're going to be talking about some of the things that I've observed with Android 12 Developer Preview 1. And this has to do with the fact that probably this is the only iteration that I have seen ever since I started using those early adoptions of the new OS, that every app that I have seems to be working. And believe it or not, even including the notorious KNFB reader that we know usually takes months or almost a year before it becomes compliant. And so I am surprisingly surprised, to put it that way, that even the KNFB reader is actually working on this very first preview of the Android 12 developer preview. And so, hey, Pete, welcome to Blind Android Users Podcast. And by the way, I do want to mention here from the get-go that Pete is one of those that uses magnification, and something that we haven't heard from some of our users. And it's good that we have someone who uses that feature of the Android Accessibility Suite. And so would like for Pete to introduce himself before we talk a little bit about the KNFB reader and then move on to other stuff of the day. Pete, you have the floor.
Hi, Warren. Yeah, my name's Pete, and I live in the south of England. I'm 53, and I've got a form of macular degeneration that I've had since a child, called Best's macular dystrophy, and so that affects my central vision, but around the periphery of my vision, that's unaffected. So it affects things like reading or recognizing faces, and can't drive, and using a phone and a computer. I tend to use specialist software. And as you mentioned, I tend to use magnification rather than text-to-speech. But if it's just a short passage of text, then I use magnification. But if it's like a whole page of text, then I'll use some kind of a speech solution, on the phone or on the desktop. And for most of my life and my career, I've worked in IT originally as a software developer. I like some really old IBM mainframes that don't exist anymore. And then more recent, I never went to university. It was something that I never really did. So in recent years, I've started a degree. I'm studying for a degree in computer science, and having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, it's all good. I love Android. Been using it for, 10, 11 years, something like that. And I just like to use IT and make the most out of accessible solutions to get on with daily living.
Hello, Pete. Welcome.
Hi, Dennis. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Something that I also find interesting in Android 12, which would be of use to someone like you who uses magnification, is that you can choose to magnify only a certain portion that you want to magnify. And then if you want the whole thing magnified, there's a little button at the bottom that you could tap on to magnify the whole thing. But you can focus on an area and just only magnify that area. So I think this is going to be something that those of you who use magnification will find very helpful in Android 12. And I'm glad to see that Google is refining that. I think that totally makes sense to me.
That sounds amazing. I didn't know there was a new feature, an enhancement like that coming along in 12. So
yeah, it's there in that first developer preview. And you go to accessibility.
Settings, privacy, safety and emergency, digital login for Google services and preferences, system, languages, general, digital safety and accessibility, screen readers.
See, because most of the time, those of us who use speech, we don't pay attention to some of these other accessibility things. And frankly, I think we need to. And that's why I'm glad we have you here, Pete, to give us the story from the other side of another accessibility feature found on our Android devices.
Interaction controls, edit, magnification off. Magnification, navigate up, button, out of list, options, heading, in list. Magnification shortcut off. About magnification, heading, settings.
Let's look at the settings.
Magnification area, full screen and part of screen, in list. Choose the magnification areas you want to use and magnify in the screen, out of list.
So
Magnify entire screen. Checkbox checked. Magnify part of screen. Checkbox checked. Cancel button. Save button.
So you can decide to say, okay, I only want to use magnify only part of the screen or the whole screen. And yet in the same breath, like I was saying earlier on, even if you choose only to magnify part of the screen, but if you find that later on while you're using it and you decide to magnify the whole screen, you don't have to come back into the system settings here. All you could do is simply hold and drag. There's a little button at the bottom that you hold and drag a little bit, and it'll just magnify the whole screen. So you don't
that
have
sounds
to. So I think this is really,
Magnification.
I'm glad to see this happening with Android
Display heading.
12.
Text to speech output.
can't wait to get my hands on it.
Screen.
And I think that probably more and more phones are going to be jumping onto the developer or even the beta. So I think between now and May, usually when the first available public beta becomes available for those who are not developers and things like that. Now, I remember, Pete, you use Samsung, right? Is it Samsung you use, or what phone?
No, I used to. I'm on OnePlus now. It's the OnePlus 8T.
So a OnePlus
they're
definitely
pretty quick, aren't they? They're fast.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
going to be one of those that will jump on that, and I'm almost optimistic you'll be in one of the first betas. So we'll see what happens, and then you could try it and see what happens. Like I was saying earlier on, the Android 12 developer preview 1 seems to be the one that I've observed that everything seems to be working. And so I was even going to show the fact that even the KNFB reader, for some odd reason, is working. I'm going to launch it.
It's a launcher.
Open KNFB reader.
Opening KNFB reader.
Isn't that surprising? Because usually when we have a new OS update or beta or whatever, even the full release, because it wasn't until like a month or so ago that the KNFB reader started working on Android 11. And believe it or not, I have reset this phone 3 times just to make sure. So I'm going to try to take a picture, and I have this book sitting on my lap. And I'm not sure if I'll just shoot the picture and see what happens.
We are the people of body. Rely we walk the path of God. Firmly we walk the path of God. Until the very last. We will be steadfast.
So
firmly we walk the path of God.
there you have it.
One of the most important qualities of a person who truly loves God is steadfastness, or firmness. As gods, we have accepted God, and we are certain that He is the manifestation of God for this day. Therefore, nothing that others can say or do to us can affect our faith in Him.
With Android 12, we have something here at the top right corner that perpetually says
battery charging.
That says home. I don't see that in either Android 11 or prior versions of the OS, but there's a little writing here on the right corner just below the where you'll see your battery status, and that says home. And that would be one of the observations besides the magnification that is also new with Android 12.
Another observation will be, and people might be hearing the demo and they can hear Eloquence. So Eloquence is working on Android 12.
That is true, Austin. I totally forgot about that because that was one of the biggest fears that we had because we were not sure if Eloquence was going to be working with Android 12. And I am surprised that actually it worked. And just like the KNFB reader, I reset the phone 3 times to make sure that Eloquence was still going to be working. And sure enough, it grabbed it from my library and it worked. So we are glad. Unless something happens down the road, for now, I can say without a doubt that Eloquence works.
And Warren, also, there is a sad news with Android 12. Not everything is happy. We have lost a trusted friend. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, the trusted friend, indeed. And the trusted friend that I'm talking about, which was the 2-finger hold down, when you boot it up and it comes up to the setup screen, for some reason, holding down the 2 fingers no longer works. And so it's a sad thing to see that that trusted friend of ours is gone with the wind. I tried it and it didn't work And after I reset the phone 3 times, so I tried it each time, and believe it or not, the 2-finger hold down doesn't work. All that we're left with right now is the 2 volume keys hold down. And I just wish that we had both, because, sometimes maybe someone has some issues with their fingers or their hand, and it may not be so easy for them to hold the 2 volumes down together. It may be easier to have the 2 fingers down instead, but now we don't have that option. So we're only left with one option.
Yeah, but things may change. This is only developer review 1, so we may see that thing come back in the final version.
We definitely might see it come back in the final version. And I'm going to keep an eye on it. And every time I get a new one, I'm going to reset the whole thing and try it and see if that thing is back. But no, it doesn't work right now. All right. And so I want to show an app before we go to Pete telling his story. And, whatever else, Dennis and Austin would like to say. I want to talk about an app that I found, and probably this is not going to be so useful to a lot of people that are outside of the US. This is an app called NPS, National Park Services.
Oh, reader. NPS.
There we go. It's the NPS. I'm going to try it on Android 12, see if it works.
Explore the National Park Service. Explore the National Park Service in pager.
Okay.
Discover how it serves your community, protects history, preserves nature, educates and inspires. Swipe left to continue, out of pager.
All right.
Page. Find and visit your national parks in pager. Explore news and events, see special content while you visit, and more.
All right.
Swipe left to continue. Save favorites and make lists in pager.
All right. Let's move to the next
Access
page.
park content anywhere. Page 4 or 5. Download maps, list of places and other content for use in areas without cell service.
All right. So that comes in
NPS,
handy
National Park, out of pager.
if you don't have mobile access, data access while you're at the park. You could download the whatever, or before you go, just download the map of that park so that you will have access to navigate using your phone. All right. So
Explore the NPS button.
So at the bottom,
Progress bar 100%.
we have explored
Explore the NPS
the
button.
NPS.
Mobile home, search.
When you tap in here, you could choose to search the park that you want to go to. Maybe you want to go to Yellowstone, or you want to go to some place, a glacier or whatever, a Rocky Mountain. Being kind of a little bit biased here, Western parks.
Visit, row 1, column 3, the grid, 2 rows, 3 columns. News, row 2, column 1.
So, and then you have things like news,
Events, column 2.
events,
Webcams, column 3.
webcams,
Featured, out of grid.
and then you have the featured one.
Featured park, Death Valley National Park, in list.
So the featured one is Death Valley. It's a place in California. There's a place there called Death Valley, for those of you that are not familiar with that part.
Featured park, Independence National Historical Park. Independence Park home. Color photo of the Liberty Bell with Independence Hall in the background. Button out of list.
In Pennsylvania, I think there's something called Independence Park. And
save this park for offline use.
So I could save it for offline use.
Help button. Off switch, not checked.
And so if I tap on the off switch, that will save the map, I believe.
Checked.
Let's see.
What to see in list. Things to do.
Okay.
Tours.
Tours.
Visitor centers. Amenities. Gardens and yards. Park calendar. Park calendar. Park news.
So
passports, basic information, right arrow out of the list. Home tab selected. 1 of 4. List 4 items.
And there we have it. So, but then at the bottom, so you got the home tab.
Map tab 2 of 4.
And you have the map.
Favorites tab 3 of 4.
And favorites.
Postcard tab 4 of 4.
And then postcard. Remember when we go to parks back in those days, you could send a postcard home and things like that. So let's see if there's any news.
Amenities been listed. Gardens and yards. Park calendar. Gardens and yards. Amenities. Visitor centers. Tours. Things to do. What to see. On switch. Check out of list.
Okay, so let's see if there's any news.
Complete. Independence National Historical Park is now ready for offline use.
Aha! So when I check that box, it downloads that map of the Independence Park, and now it should be in my favorites.
Visitor centers. Amenities. Gardens and yards. Park calendar. Park news.
Let's see if there's any news.
Navigate up button out of list. Independence National Historical Park. Independence National Historical Park beginning to increase access to Independence Hall of the Liberty Bell. September 4th, 2020. Enlisted.
All right, so that's the little news there. But that's how it works. So to see that even working on Android 12, is very encouraging because that shows that a lot of the apps, like I said, I haven't seen any of my apps that is crashing yet. I haven't checked all of them. The one thing, though, that I like to mention here in passing is that the Google Pay is not working. So out of all of those, Google Pay is not working. And that will be my little observation of the Android 12 developer preview. As we find more and more stuff, we'll be posting that on our mailing list and on our Telegram channel. All right, boys, I think I've talked enough.
This is like the review of Android 12 after 1 or 2 days of usage.
That is true, because I didn't have time to look into the various apps that we have on Android 12. I mean, like my existing apps and things like that. So after playing with it for a couple of days now and realizing that every app of mine that I have is working there, or almost all, because I haven't found one that has crashed yet. So I'm not sure which one is not going to crash. You know what? Maybe I should have tried another app that people use. But I've tried Lookout. Lookout works. I've tried SuperSense, and it works. And so it seems like every app that I have works, and most especially if that KNFB reader works, then I think the tendency is that every other app would work, because that one was very notorious for not working with new iterations of the OS. Pete, you're going to be telling us about one password manager app that you have, right?
Yeah, so that's right, Warren. Yeah.
How about we just, if these boys don't have anything to say, we just
let's go for the demo.
Of the hour.
Yeah.
Okay. So I a few years ago, I started to investigate password managers, and it's not really the kind of thing I like to try and remember everything myself and just not rely on software that sometimes gets in the way and makes things slow. But I sort of realized with all the data breaches that happen these days, like big companies, well-known companies like LinkedIn and Equifax and Yahoo were having data breaches, and there's millions of records were out there of passwords and user IDs and things like that. And I thought, well, actually, at that time, I was still kind of using the same password or similar passwords on different websites, on different apps. So the thought that, there are databases out there that have got my user ID, my email address, and then my passwords. I was thinking that somebody could see that was my password for, say, Yahoo, and then try that on a different service. So I thought it really is time to start using a different password for each app, for each website. And of course, these days we all use so many, don't we? There was just no way I was going to be able to remember every single password for every single, website and app. So I started to look at different password managers, and I first went for the commercial one. I used LastPass, and I've got to say LastPass works great. And I think if anybody wants to use a password manager and maybe they're not very confident technically, then something like LastPass on Android and then on web browsers and then on desktops and laptops, it works really well. And I used it for about a year or so. The problem I had really with LastPass is then some of the features, I was using the free version, and some of the features I wanted to use then only became available in the paid subscription. And originally it was $1 a month. And I thought, well, that's okay. It's good software. I'll support the development. And, sometimes you have to pay if you want good software. It's not always free or open source. So I was paying $1 a month. And then after a few months, the price went up to $2 a month. And I'm thinking, I'm thinking, actually, I've got 100 passwords now stored in LastPass, and I'm using it. It's like my most valuable thing in terms of IT. And they've kind of got these golden handcuffs on me. I was kind of trapped. So, and that's it. Nobody wants that, do they?
No.
So I started to investigate other password managers, ones that, basically just that run on your device yourself rather than being cloud-based.
Pete, sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
just to mention here in passing that last week or this week, LastPass came up saying that, hey, as of March 16th, what's going to happen is that you can only use it on one platform, but if you wanted to sync with other, platforms, then you're going to be paying, the subscription. So just want to throw that out there, so people who use LastPass will be aware of that. So in other words, if you're using it mainly on, say, your Android phone, you can have many Android phones on it as you want, but you cannot say, hey, I have an Apple phone, a Fruitvale phone, or you have to put it on my desktop on there. It's not going to let you do that. But if all you want to do is use it on your computer and have many computers as you want, you can
That's
do
the
that as
advantage
well.
to 1Password. It will give you as many devices as you own. So it may be worth looking at 1Password.
Yeah, well, no. What is going on though? LastPass will let you have the different platforms if you pay for it. But if you're going to be using the free version, now you're going to only be able to use it on one platform, but you could have many devices on that platform as you choose. Does that make sense? You're trying to make a little bit of moolah. How about 1Password? Is it free, Dennis?
I heard that you can have as many. 1Password will allow you to have as many devices as you own as part of their subscription. It's not broken.
So yeah, no, but LastPass would do that too. But what I'm saying is that with LastPass, prior to subscription, now you could, as a free user, you could have many devices, different platforms, and they will all sync. But now, as of the 16th of March, what's going to happen is that you cannot use that on different platforms. You can only have it on one platform, that you could have many devices on that same platform. But if you want it, say, on Windows, on your iPhone, on your Android, or whatever, you'll have to pay $4 a month subscription. I believe that's what the price is. So it's not that it's not going to let you, but as a free user, you can't do that anymore. But you can only do that on one platform with several devices from that same platform. So I think that they're kind of following what the 1Password is doing then. All right, Pete. But I just wanted to mention that, so people are aware of what's going on. And I tell you, so we go back to Pete's story and take it from here, Pete.
Yeah, and when this is the point, that when one of these companies changes their pricing model, and you've got all of 100 passwords in there or 200, you're kind of locked into that platform, and they can just put the price up a little bit now and then, and and then over time, you realize you're actually paying quite a lot. And they're great products, they're great password managers, but I didn't want to be locked into anything, especially like being an Android user. We're kind of used to things being open, aren't we, and flexible, and we can choose our own solutions. So I did some research and Googled around, and I found a password manager format called Keepass. So that's KEEPASS. And that's kind of like the format of the database that you store your passwords in and all your credentials. And there's an app on Android called Keepass, and then the number 2, the digit 2, and then Android. So Keepass 2 Android. It's in the Google Play Store. It's completely free. The developer, he asks maybe buy him a beer, make a small donation, just so it contributes to the development. And the thing is, it uses this Keepass database format, but then on desktop platforms, so Windows and Linux, and there's other different platforms, there's some software called Keepass XC. So just add the letter X and C on the end of it. It's completely free software. It's open source software. The source code gets scrutinized by enthusiasts to make sure it's secure. And what you can do is you can have one single database with everything in there, all your passwords, and you can have a copy of that on your Android phone, on your Android tablet, and use the Keepass 2 Android app. But also that same database, you can then copy it over onto your desktop, your laptop, whatever, and use Keepass XC software on one of those platforms. So you just have one database, share it around all your devices, and you've got access to all of your apps that require login, all of the websites that require login, and it works really well. I would say to mention, I use some software. I don't know if you guys have come across it, called SyncThing. That's SYNC.
I think some people use that SyncThing. Yeah.
SyncThing. Yeah. Again, completely free software, open source software. It's on GitHub and it's on syncthing.net. And this is software that runs on any Android platform. It runs on Windows. It runs on Linux. And it's just a really great utility that will copy your data across from one device to another. So if you don't want to use a cloud service, if you don't want to use Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox, you can sort of replicate your files, your documents on all of your devices, and SyncThing will keep everything up to date. So if you update a document on one device on your Android phone, SyncThing will make sure that it copies that updated version onto your other devices. So every device you have all has the same version. And of course, then every device also acts as like a backup. So, if one day you lost your phone or it got smashed or damaged, all of your data is already backed up onto your laptop, your desktop, through SyncThing. So it's kind of a really useful tool for having the same data on all your devices, but also having a backup on each different device. So it's quite a good system. Again, completely free software. So I'm using Keepass to Android on my Android devices, and the database, my password database, is on there. And then SyncThing takes care of copying that across to all the other devices. And on my Windows and on my Linux, I'm using Keepass XC Password Manager, and it works great. Now, if I sort of go into Keepass to Android on my phone, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Warren, I tend to use Magnification, so I'm not a TalkBack user.
No.
So, guys, just please bear with me while I kind of do the demonstration, talk through what I'm doing.
Sure.
I kind of use Magnification. Every year as eyesight changes, the magnification goes up and up and up. I really need to use TalkBack because I think I'm going to be much more productive. So I think once my phone has got there's like this new version I keep hearing about with the multi-touch gestures. So I think once that's on my phone, I think it's time to make the change. So I'm going to go now I've got an app on my phone. It's so I've chosen an app that requires a user ID and login. So in this case, for this example, I'm just going to go into BBC Sounds. So this is like a little streaming app that the BBC have got for their content, their podcasts and their radio streams. So on the front page, I've got the option to sign in or register. So I'm just going to click on sign in. And there's now a login screen on my phone. So it's asking for email or username. And then below that, it's asking for password. So when I put the focus on the entry box for email or username, at this point, my password manager kicks in and it's superimposed on the screen. It says, fill with Keepass to Android. So I'm going to touch that.
Wow.
And okay, now here we go. Because it's been a while since I've used the password manager, it's asking me now to authenticate that, because I guess my phone, may have left it on a table in a cafe or something like that, and somebody pick up my phone. So I've got it set up to authenticate using a fingerprint. So I'm just touching the standard Android fingerprint scanner.
Nice.
Okay, so it authenticated on my fingerprint, and now it's gone back to the BBC app. And it's detected, it's matched on the URI for the app, which is like a URL, isn't it? But kind of used for apps on the storage system. It's detected it's the valid one for BBC, and it's saying, do you want to use your BBC password? So I'm going to touch on that to say use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. And now it's filled in my email address. It's filled in my password for BBC. So all I need to do now is on the BBC app is touch on the sign in button, and that's it. It's logged me in. So I'm now logged in. So actually, for anybody, I mean, a lot of people using passwords managers now. But the point is that I don't even know my password for BBC. It's like 40 characters long. It's using all the special characters, all the strange characters. It's using uppercase, lowercase. I don't even know what it is. And the thing is, I'm only using that password for BBC, nowhere else. And that's kind of repeated everywhere. So every website, every app, in the password manager, I've got, they've all got their own password, and I just change them, each one occasionally from time to time. And then if ever there's a breach and the data gets leaked and published on the internet, on public internet, it's only that one breach, that one password that's exposed, because I'm not using that password anywhere else. If some hacker downloads the database and they see my email address, but that password will only work with the BBC. And you know what? I'll just change it. So they can't even use that anymore either.
That's beautiful.
I just have a comment on the password manager demo. So if you go to a website called HAVEIBENPWNED.com, and we'll have this in our show notes. You put your email ID there and just click on the button, and you will be shocked at the number of breaches that your email ID has been involved in.
Yeah, that's a really great website, isn't it, Austin? Have-I-Been-Pwned? And you spelt it, and that it lists all the breaches, where your email is, and the password. And can I mention another website very similar to Have-I-Been-Pwned, but there's one called breachdirectory.tk. So that's breachdirectory.tk. So it's breachdirectory.tk. Very similar to Have-I-Been-Pwned. You can put in your email address, and it will tell you all the different breaches where your email address is. Here's the thing as well. It also shows a few characters of the password from each of those places.
That is serious. And if you are on the blacklist of the breaches, then you change your passwords ASAP.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I noticed that, because I use the Google, and Google Password Manager does that too. It reveals to you how many of your, passwords have been breached, and you could change that. So, Pete, take us a little back to when you started with Android. Were there any, problems, things that frustrated you, that Android journey story? Were there some things that, kind of, you were happy with, other things that didn't quite make you happy, or, things that you struggled with?
Yeah, a few things actually, Warren, because I kind of got onto the Android platform as soon as it was available. So my first Android device was a really small phone. Now I've still got it. Looks so small compared to the modern phones, but it was an HTC Magic, and
I think Magic.
Yeah, do you remember that one?
The Magic. The word magic rings a magic somewhere. All right, keep going, Pete.
Yeah, and this was like towards like the autumn of 2009, and it was the first Android device available in the UK. But a couple of months before that came out, I'd spent a lot of money buying a new Nokia phone, and it was one of the top end business Nokia phones with like it kind of held it landscape, and the QWERTY keyboard slid out from underneath, from behind, and it ran an operating system called Symbian.
That's right.
Yeah, and the reason I'd gone for that was because, Warren, you were demonstrating earlier KNFB reader. Well, that had just launched. That had just been published on Nokia Symbian, and it was this amazing new thing that you could take a photograph. You might have a bus timetable in your hand, or you may be in a restaurant and have a menu, and instead of like asking somebody else to read it, you could just take your phone out, have a KNFB reader, take a photograph of the menu, and just it would speak to you the menu. There was one big problem.
Very expensive. I think it was almost like
$2,000
here with the phone and the software on it, and it took a lot of moolah out of our pockets.
Exactly, yeah. So in one way it's accessible software, but in another way it's not accessible because it's like $2,000.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, wow, I've just bought the phone. I can't afford the software as well. And then Android was launched in the UK. So my son was very lucky. He picked up this brand new shiny Nokia top end phone, and I bought an HTC Magic, and of course then apps were like 99 cents, or in the UK 99p or 69p, just so cheap, or even free. So HTC Magic running Android 1.6. So I used that for a couple of years. And I think the big discovery for me at that point was Google Maps. It just was like a life changer, being able to get around, be independent. I remember that whenever I was going for like a job interview or some kind of like an important meeting, what I would do is a couple of days before I would do that journey. So I'd get the train or get the bus, and you have all your timetables there in your rucksack, and you work out the journey and all of that. I would go and do the journey a couple of days before, maybe the weekend before, do the whole journey, maybe 50, 60 miles, find out where all the bus stops are, find the front door to the, like the business entrance to where I was going for the meeting, or that, if it was an interview, a job interview or something like that. So that when I needed to do the journey for real, like a few days later, I kind of was confident that I knew what I needed to do, how I'd find the building, where I'd find the bus stops and things like that. So when Google Maps was available on a mobile device, that made a huge difference. But actually, the early versions, they didn't have route planning for public transport, so there was still a manual process. It's kind of funny, isn't it? It's amazing to think how much it's developed, but
and it keeps changing.
Yeah.
So from the Magic, which one did you go to?
Well, I stayed with
that path.
Yeah, I stayed with HTC, and they brought out it was a faster phone called the Wildfire.
I love that Wildfire, baby.
Yeah, great, much faster, great phone, better display. That one didn't have a trackball because the HTC Magic, although it was touchscreen, it also had a little trackball at the bottom.
All the Android phones at that time used to have that, yeah.
Right. So I think by the time the Wildfire came out, they'd already lost that, because, of course, these mobile phone manufacturers are always looking at ways of reducing costs, and the fewer buttons that are on there and the fewer ports, it saves them money, doesn't it? And so the trackball had gone with the Wildfire. And it was round about when the Wildfire came out, I discovered that you could load your own ROM, like Cyanogen was the big thing then. So
there's the Mongolian river starting right there. Austin.
That's it.
Pete, you went for baptism then.
Yeah, and Austin gave a fantastic demonstration a couple of weeks back about loading a custom ROM, and did a really great job with that. And back in the day, then it was such a scary thing to do. And I think the Wildfire was still under warranty when I decided to load a new ROM. Which was crazy. And I remember after kind of putting the new ROM on there for the very first time and then switching the phone back on, that first boot, it takes like 5 minutes. And I thought, oh no, I've ruined the device. I've bricked my wonderful phone. But then after about 5 minutes, it then slowly started to come awake and everything started to work. So yeah, exciting times. So I used that for a couple more years, and then I was really tempted by Samsung. So the first Samsung phone I had was the S3, Samsung S3.
Beautiful phone, yeah.
And again, that was a big step forward from. When I go for a phone, I tend to use it for as long as I can, and so I tend to get about 3 years, something like that, before I change.
Well, it makes sense, that S3 came out. That was in 2012. Yeah.
Oh, was it? Right.
Yeah, and that was a great phone. One of the beautiful phones Samsung ever made, so it was a life changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, you only get support for security updates for a couple of years, something like that. And then they move on. They stop supporting that model phone because they want you to upgrade. So again, I would then sort of start loading custom ROMs to make sure I'd get the latest version of Android and the latest security updates. So it does extend the life of a device. And round about then, I thought, I really want to have a go at developing an app for Android. So I started to learn about how you develop for Android, and then it was all about using a development platform called Eclipse. And so it's Java based for Android, and I developed an app which, last week you talked about Lazarillo and what a fantastic app that is.
Yeah, the GPS app. That's right.
Yeah. Well, back in sort of like 2012, something like that, I developed my very own kind of very basic version, I guess, of what would be Lazarillo, but not anything like as sophisticated as Lazarillo. But it was just a really simple app to navigate you to get from one point to another, and it's kind of spoke. So it was using GPS, and it spoke directions. I was just using like the clock face at the time. So if you needed to go straight ahead, I would say, go at 12 o'clock, go straight ahead. Or if a person needed to turn right, I would say point to 3 o'clock, turn right. So you knew you needed to turn around to the right, or 9 o'clock to turn left. And then I added an API, Google Maps API, which was free then, for limited use, and it would kind of tell you what things were nearby where you were, if there were bus stops nearby or ATMs. So I got in touch with the BBC and mentioned about this app, because back then there weren't many apps that would do this, and it was, I just published it on Google Play Store for free, and a radio presenter here in the UK, blind radio presenter Peter White, he picked it up, he got involved and was interested. So he sent a reporter over, a guy called Manny Jasmi, then he was a BBC reporter and a blind reporter. Manny came out to meet me, and it was a cold winter's day. So he said, it was great. We had a really nice chat. He's a lovely guy, and he said, "Okay, Pete, let's try the app." So I got my phone out, and I think it had been switched off at this point. I was saving the battery, and I switched it on. Oh no! And Manny had his recording equipment going, and it was a disaster because for some reason my phone couldn't get a GPS lock. And I don't know if you remember back in the sort of early days of GPS. Yeah. Sometimes it would take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour or so to get a GPS lock. So the recording equipment was recording, and Manny's asking me about this app, and it was a complete disaster because it just it wasn't working. There was no GPS for some reason. So it was all recorded. So then the next day when the radio program went out, that was the demonstration of my app. So that wasn't too successful, but there we go. Things always seem to go wrong, don't they? But
I noticed that happening a lot of times, trying to demonstrate something. I mean, even on our podcast, sometimes I'm trying to demonstrate a particular app or whatever the case may be. And I just realized it's not behaving like it was earlier. I mean, it's terrible.
It's almost like the technology knows, like when it's the most important time, that's when it decides not to work. So it happens all the time. Yeah.
It is the curse of the demonstration monster.
Exactamundo, my point. Oh my gosh! So from Samsung the S3, where did you migrate to?
So I kept hold of that. Skipped a model, went to the S5, and that was another great phone. I was really happy with that. And then
I want to plug in here, Pete, that the S5 was the very first phone, at least for those of us who are blind, that the camera has a face detection recognition, and kudos to Samsung for doing that. That was the very first time, or else on Android, as blind people, we didn't have a feature that says, hey, there's a face in the camera view or anything like that until that Galaxy S5. So for those of you who had Samsung, just remember that they are the pioneers that made this possible for us on Android, where now we have camera apps that now tell us how many faces are there in the camera view. So kudos to Samsung for opening that door.
Yeah, good point. And it was a great phone, wasn't it? And used that for many years. Switched over to OnePlus 6 and used that for a few years. And Warren, guys, I've got to tell you, last year, I kind of did the thing that we shouldn't do. I switched from Android.
What did you do?
I switched over to iPhone.
Oh,
Because-
bro, I'm going to take your supper tonight.
I know. I'm so embarrassed. Well, here's the thing. But it was a temporary switch. So I was listening to podcasts for visually impaired people who like technology, like geeky podcasts and things. And all the time, everybody talks about iPhones are so good and iPhones are so accessible. And, they are, Apple, they've done so much for the visually impaired community. So I bought an iPhone SE 2020, which came out in March last year.
That's
it was
right.
kind of like, a lower, it was still a lot of money, like $500-600 or, or pounds for me. So still a lot of money, but kind of cheap for an iPhone. And I mentioned that I use magnification rather than voice. So in Android, I always set my font size to be the largest, and I set the display size to be the largest. I think that's kind of like the dots per inch setting, isn't it? So everything gets bigger. So that was it. I got my new iPhone, and I went straight, when I switched it on, that was the first thing I did, was change the font size to the largest. And I can't remember what they call display size in iOS, but there's like a similar thing. And then started downloading my apps. And I was just so disappointed because the Apple apps respect the font size setting in system settings, but the third-party apps, which is like most of my apps are third-party apps, so few of them on iOS kind of respect the font size setting.
Yeah.
And so I selected largest fonts, but then when the apps start up, they would just either they didn't display large fonts, or maybe they did, but the developers hadn't tested the layout of the screen with large fonts, and just fields would overlap each other, and and screens were kind of messy. So then I went back into system settings and reduced the font size and things like that. And I thought, look, I've made the change. I didn't have an Android phone anymore. I'm going for iOS. You knew it was going to be different, so don't be afraid of it. Invest the time, learn all the shortcuts. So I did all of that, carried on for 6 months, but after 6 months, I found that I was using a handheld magnifying glass whenever I wanted to use my phone. And it was like going back 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
So like in one pocket, I have my phone, and in the other pocket, I had a magnifying glass, like a x5.
Carrying two gadgets just to make it work, some of the things that we used to do. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. And it's not a good user experience when you're having to use a magnifying glass with your phone. It's and you're using both hands then, and then it gets tricky to type on the keypad and things like that. So around about November last year, I saw OnePlus launch their new, they bring out like the T version of the model, don't they, in the autumn. So I switched. I bought a OnePlus 8T, which is my current phone, and I system reset the iPhone, sold it on eBay, and that's it. I've just been so happy moving back to Android. I like the configurability. I like all of the openness. You can get a USB lead, plug it into a computer, drag and drop your files. You can buy cheap earbuds that, they support like aptX codec, which is like really high fidelity sound quality and low latency. And that kind of thing's not available on Apple. They kind of lock down the codecs. So for like $70, you can buy really good quality earbuds that support super fast codecs. And I've just been so glad to move back to Android. So this is my Android journey. I'm just like from the beginning, and I have dabbled with iOS and a lot of respect for iOS, but it's not for me. As a low vision user, Android all the way. It's so much more accessible.
That's a beautiful story, Pete. We all have been down that road, and I remember my early days with iOS. I actually started with them, and how I was even still not very good at it at the time, and I utilized Apple Vis, for a while to get me going, and then when I got into Android, of course, I had rough start getting going and things like that. So your story is familiar sounding to just about all of the other stories that we've heard. And then, as late as last year, you went back to it. And
Yeah.
And then here you're back again with Android. So that's a beautiful story. One cannot say, hey, you've never tried it or anything like that. So it's always good to be able to have that experience and then realize which one it is that you are most productive with, to use the term that people like to use all the time, or
Yeah.
this is more productive on this, I'm not productive on that. But at least you've been there on both sides of the aisle, and now you know what it is and what meets your need the most. And I think that's what it all comes down to. It's what meets our needs that matters the most.
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong, is there? It's what works for you. And we're just so lucky now to be living in an age where there is so much accessible technology, and moving on from like the navigation apps like Lazarillo and Google Maps to the KNFB reader, where it'll photograph a book and read the book, and we can download books from Bookshare and all of that. It's the devices that are available to us now really do make us much more independent. It's great.
Now, Pete, I want to mention something here. So my comment has to do with the app that you wrote, the navigational app that you wrote, that the guy came to film you or do an interview with you, and the app bombed out, or the phone bombed out, I should say. And so, Pete, it would have been nice to see that thing, continue, because I know there was another guy from the UK. I think his name, Les. I just used to call him Les, and he had the Now Nav app. You guys remember that, Austin? Yeah, so he had the
No, I'm
Now
not aware
Nav
of it.
app, and it was free, and then he made it for like $30 or something, and I guess something happened. I think back in either 2017 or 2018 that Google, you were talking about those Google Map APIs. They became very expensive, or have become very expensive, and that has actually kind of killed a lot of otherwise good apps like the one that you are talking about. And I think that's what killed Les's Now Nav app.
Yeah, that's the thing with APIs, that when they were launched and they became available, very often they were free. So you could write an app that could use the data from an API like Google Maps API, or even like public transport systems would publish like bus times and train times and things like that. So you could link to them. And then they started to, obviously they realized that more and more people were hitting their servers with these APIs, and they needed to invest in their server infrastructure and all of that.
Yeah.
So then they start to charge for the APIs. So it's difficult to make software for free. And then as the developer, you're kind of at risk of running up a big bill with Google or with Microsoft.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of wondering, though, as something like OpenStreetMap, maybe I know that database, a lot of other GPS makers, have turned to of late, because, that is free. And, maybe, Pete, since you're now back in school, maybe it's something you can look back into, give that thing a resurrection, give it life, and see, we'll be proud to, see something come from you, one of our own,
Warren, that
giving us
sounds good,
something to use.
actually. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to look into it.
This time it's not going to mess you up when Manny comes back to interview you.
Let's hope it would work. I still wake up in the middle of the night and I remember that. So, but these things happen. Character building. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it could be time for a new app. Yeah.
That sounds good. Dennis, any questions for Pete?
I want to thank you, Pete, for coming. It was great having experience from a low vision user. If you run into any questions or problems when you start using TalkBack, certainly subscribe to our list and ask there. Hopefully everything you will need will be accessible via TalkBack, and if not, hopefully it will become accessible.
Great, thanks, Dennis. And I really enjoy the podcast, Blind Android Users podcast, and I'm learning every time there's a new episode, like even the one that came out a couple of days ago about Android 12. I'm learning so much, and it's just nice to have like a a resource that's specific to like Android users who are visually impaired. So
right.
it's
The
so
only
good.
thing I would caution with these developer previews is the word preview is there for a reason. Thus, things could come and go. So that would be the biggest caution that I would give to people.
If you have other phones, I would say, put it on maybe a phone that is not your main driver. So I have it on my Pixel 3a, and that's the one I have it on, but I've transferred my SIM card to it that very same day. And so it's, I'm making my calls with it. Everything works well. And, tried different, Duo and Telegram and regular calls, and I'm not seeing any problems as to the Android 11 preview 1 and 2 and 3. Things were not very good. And like I said, this is the first time I've seen the first preview of the OS working so well. So I'm so happy with my decision. And so I'm going to be using this Pixel 3a as my main driver because I want to be able to find things that are not working well with our accessibility and report those issues back to the developers.
And for those who are in the Mongolian River, the GSI of Android 12 Developer Preview 1 is now available to Flash. But big caution, there are lots of bugs.
Well,
because it is quoted from Pixel 3.
That's right. And you could, Austin, well,
and I'm not saying you will have problems, but it does need to be thrown out there. You may have problems, and we are not responsible if you should encounter problems. You are flashing and ROMing this at your own risk. We at Blind Android users are not responsible if you brick your device, miss a step, don't follow the proper directions, grab the wrong ROM, whatever the case may be. If you choose to flash a developer build, you are doing so at your own risk.
Exactly. And we're not necessarily trying to, tell people, hey, go out and do this now. It's just for those who want to try it. And like I said, if you're going to do this, you want to make sure you have other devices and don't put it on your main driver so that if something happens to it, it's not affecting your productivity. So there's a word of caution there, Dennis, and that's really nice.
If you choose at some point to move it to your main device, there again, we at Blind Android users are not responsible. Just because we have may have a bug-free experience does not mean you will encounter the same or similar results. Your results and mileage may vary based on app usage and factors beyond our control.
The good news is that, if when the very first public beta becomes available, once you enroll, it automatically would install. And if you find out that you don't like it, you can just go click on unenroll, and it would revert you back to your previous version of Android, version 11. So it's unlike this process of manually flashing it. If you decide that you don't want to go with it, something is not working right or something of that sort, you'll have to manually flash back the Android 11 factory images again. So that's a little bit involved. And therefore, most people, I would say, just wait till that public OTA beta is available. All is just a tap of the enroll or unenroll. That's it. Nothing else to do. Okay, Mongolian minister, any word of caution, or we're going to bring this baby to a close?
Let's bring it to the close. What's
Well,
happening here?
it's been a great time with our friend Pete, and this goes out to every member of our list. If you want to come on live and just have a chat during our podcast, I think that's a wonderful time for people to get to know who you are, besides just telling them about, your Android journey story, whether you send it by recording. But I think it becomes very special when you come on live. And so, like I said, we wouldn't mind, people coming on and just having a chat with us during this podcast.
Anytime. Yeah. And it's a privilege to be here. And you guys, I really appreciate your work, everything you're doing here. And if I can get involved sometimes or whatever, absolutely. That would be great.
Well, boys, you want to give our info at the closing?
All right, everybody. Thank you, Pete, for your interview. It was a pleasure. We thank you all for listening to the Blind Android Users podcast. If you wish to get in touch with us, please feel free to reach out and contact us at blindandroidusers.com. That's contact us at blindandroidusers.com. Or you can subscribe to our Blind Android Users group at Blind Android Users, plus subscribe at groups.io. That is Blind Android Users with an S, plus subscribe at groups.io. And we will catch you next week. Have a great week, everyone.
And if you like Twitter, you can follow us at Blindroid Users. See, even me, who doesn't do the tweet thing, remember that we have a Twitter account, and you can follow us there. You know, we post things on there as well. So it's another way to catch us. And Austin, there's another one, right? Our Telegram
And
channel.
don't forget the Telegram
baby.
group.
That's your
That's my
favorite
favorite.
baby.
Yeah.
And all of these things will be.
I hardly use Telegram and Twitter, so I forgot.
All of these things actually are going to be, in the show notes.
Yes, read the show
Telegram
notes. We write them up for a reason.
Exactly. Thank you, Dennis. We write them up for a reason. We have those things there in the show notes. And so you guys, all of the things that we've mentioned here, from Keepass to Keepass 2 to Keepass XC and all of that, all of those things are going to be in the show notes, just in case you want to give those things a try. And also, if you want to find out if your email or password has been breached, all that info that Austin and Pete talk about, we'll put those web addresses in there as well. Guys, thank you so much. A beautiful Saturday here. We had a break from the snow, and so it's a nice thing to see that we may be having the sun out here today. Maybe we're up to like 23 degrees, so it's a beautiful thing.